Shalom from Jerusalem, and welcome to the second part of our conversation with Brigadier-General Effi Defrin, the head of the Israeli International Cooperation Division of the General Staff. This is Watchmen Talk, a series of conversations with Israeli security experts and practitioners. Welcome again, Effi.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
In our first part, we talked about your own experience about coming up through armor, commanding in battle in Lebanon, being badly wounded, and after recuperating, changing course by, first of all, going twice to military school abroad in the UK and then India, and becoming the Israeli Defense Attaché in New Delhi, which was, of course, a stepping stone to your current position. How did you find India when you got there? What was interesting there for you to find out during this year? Was that a period of 3 years running, first one in the school and then immediately thereafter as an attaché?
Yes, immediately. I studied in India, as I mentioned before. I did my national defense school. It's an exchange, officer exchange program. We have Indian officers studying in the Israeli National Defense College every year. And almost every year we have an Israeli officer which study in Delhi. It was a very unique and amazing opportunity for me. And again, personally and also officially and professionally, because I learned a lot from that. It's a different planet for an Israeli officer. We are very, very much Western-oriented. If we think about India or the East as a whole, we think about, we have tradition of officers or soldiers who retire from the military service, their compulsory service of 3 years, very hard service, and going to travel in India or in South America. So this was my orientation about India. I didn't think anything. I thought one day I might climb the Himalayas in Nepal or something, or travel the beautiful beaches of Goa when I'll have time and retire. But I didn't think to go and learn there, study there, and serve there. So it's an amazing continent, subcontinents, 1.3 billion people, different cultures. Again, very different from the Western way of thinking and the Israeli way of thinking. We have much to learn from them, and I learned a lot.
The Israeli Defense Forces, when was created in the late 1940s, and then as it grew in the 1950s, still had a lot of the British tradition. At least one of the strengths, along with other strengths such as irregular warfare and the Second World War partisans and others, one of the strengths, especially in the armored corps, was the British Army. And of course, the Indian Army is also an offshoot of the old British Army. What did you counter there, especially coming from the UK, as you did?
Right. So before I went to India, I had a meeting with the British Defense Attaché in Israel. At that time, it was 2015. He served in India before that. And then we had a meeting, and he said, talked to me about different issues, about warfare and tanks, and also he wanted to talk with me about my experience. And then I mentioned that I'm going to live to India. So he said, wow, amazing. India, the British military, if you want to look back at history and see how the British military looked at the end of the 18th century, look at the Indian military today, you'll see beautiful reflection of the British military, because he said, sadly, we as Brits lost a lot of our heritage, lost a lot of our traditions because of budgets and change in reality, but the Indians kept it. So
I mean the regiments?
Yeah, the regiment system, which still exists in Britain, but differently. And also the way they wear, the way they behave to officers and the traditions. In my opinion, as an armed officer, unfortunately, we lost as Israelis, because we have two main influences on the Israel. You mentioned the British military influence and the traditions we got from the Brits, which usually is mainly is the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli Armor Corps. This is the Chaim Laskov and all these officers who came from as a Weizmann, who came from the British military. And we have the biggest influence, which also, in my opinion, relates to your first questions about our chiefs, from the underground, the Israeli undergrounds, which were more, it wasn't, official military, it was guerrilla organizations.
Popular army.
Yeah, popular army. They didn't have uniform, no ranks, no officiality, no hierarchy. And they had to, they had a lot of initiative, and they had to invent new things all the time and to survive. And when Israel was established, and then 26th of May 1948, when David Ben-Gurion announced the buildup of the new Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli Army, these two forces, merged together and created this military. So we still these days, Israeli infantry has lots of influence from this.
But it is said that morale and the esprit de corps and audacity are fine for an infantry assault. A mechanical vehicle such as a tank needs some discipline.
Discipline and tradition and learning from experience. Otherwise, you can't do it. So this is the main influences. Now, being in India, it's an amazing country, and I learned a lot from them. Especially, let's not talk. I'm not talking about the military and how to operate military, though we have much to learn. I learned that in the Kashmir area, in their struggle over there are more than 800 casualties a year. It's a huge number of people.
Did you go to the line of control there?
I was during my studies. I visited the line of control. Yes, and. Amazing the challenges that they are facing. They're protecting their villages and protecting this line from penetrators and infiltrators and hostile infiltrators is amazing.
And mountain warfare, when you were serving on the Golan Heights or going into Lebanon, these are not very high mountains.
Yeah, these are not even mountains. They are not small hills.
Foothills.
Yeah, exactly, compared to what they faced there. So, it's the Indian military is very traditional. On one hand, on the other hand, it's 21,000 kilometers of borders. I think it's 14,000 kilometers at sea and 7 at land. It's huge. I mean, the scale is totally different than what we are facing in Israel. So,
did they also cover a very sensitive topic, and that is how to conduct regular conventional warfare in the face of unconventional arsenals? The nuclear arsenals, which both the Indians and the Pakistanis have.
Well, it's a mean of deterrence between these two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan. And yes, we didn't discuss it a lot. Naturally, it's very covert issues which they are not, sharing with partners, as they respect Israel, but not sharing these issues with us. And I respected that being there. But again, there are many other issues we could discuss together.
What did you find out when serving in India, not as a student, as an attaché, regarding the Israeli defense industry and arms sales and cooperation to and with India?
Your question relates to my experience in abroad as a whole, and it also connects me to my my role now as the chief Israeli military diplomat, and the corps I'm commanding now, which is the how Israel is being perceived by our friends and foes around the world, and the IDF is being perceived because again, and I'm trying to be modest here. First, the IDF is perceived first as modest force. I mean, and our officers abroad are being educated. I mean, first you listen, then you say. This is first thing, and second thing.
It's very difficult for Israelis.
Very Israeli, very Israeli to talk, and very hard for us to shut up sometimes. But it's not because of we are trying to show off. It's because again, unfortunately, we have lots of experience regarding the issues we mentioned before. So. The IDF, the Israel Defense Force, is perceived as the cutting edge of modern military with a lot of experience using modern technology, the best technology, with a lot of initiatives and a lot of innovations. Israel as a whole is perceived as an innovation country, but the military is utilizing these innovations into his uses. Sometimes he's starting these innovations and then they are used to different capabilities. So one of the things I was working in India as a defense attaché is trying to, India is most of its economy is about agriculture and how to utilize water because of lower resources of water. And this is something they found out in Israel. So we are trying to teach them how to use satellites and space technology in order to find how every route of every can utilize the water. So you can imagine the military uses for these two implications.
No, the use is civilian, but the hardware and the technology which you are trying to to sell or to help sell is military defense, aerospace.
Right, just to make it clear, myself as military officer and defense attaché and the Israeli military, regardless of what I said before, of being perceived as innovative and so on and so forth, we are not selling weapons in no means. Any Israeli officer in service will never will sell any weapon to any country. What we are doing is sharing our experience, and we are selling so-called perception. So like protecting our borders in different kinds of terrain and different challenges, like the proxy warfare we are facing and the proxies of modern countries like Iran, which supplies with modern weapons to it.
Protecting borders through fences, obstacles.
Exactly. So what we share is our experience and our perception, the doctrine, how we do it. Now, at the end of this day of talking about this perception, there are toys. There are weapons. There is fence, like you mentioned. There are cameras. There are drones or whatever we use, or in sensors, different sensors, which our industries are very good in it. So this is one of the things.
So you come back to Israel, and you are appointed, in essence, as you said, either the foreign minister or the Director-General of the foreign ministry of the Israeli military, in charge of liaison with essentially all other points of contact.
Right.
Could you describe your job?
Yeah. First, I just came back here from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are having, our coordination meetings once in a while. We are not replacing the Israeli Foreign Affairs, which is amazing. Professionals. It's built by professional and have huge history of protecting Israel with his own
You
means.
interface with the geographical bureaus or with the political military one?
Both on different means, and I will give you some example right away. So this is the first thing. We are the combination between the two efforts is making it the synergy better between us, because we are second in this. The front row is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and second,
modest,
the other row is the military.
As you say, modest.
No, but naturally, as I said before, because the military, because IDF is very published around BBC, CNN, other television around the world, is very popular. Very, I don't know if popular is the right word, but is very, is known around the world with these capabilities, and he's perceived as cutting edge. We are called to say what we have to say about things. We have to be coordinated with the Israeli interest. We are not military for the Israeli military. The aim is the Israeli interest, and we are part of it. So in my job, I'm responsible for three main, vectors. First one is our main friend and ally in the world is the United States of America, which we have very unique relations with, and we have a variety of connections with them.
You
with
don't
the
have
forces.
One point of contact, one counterpart?
Several,
Could you list them? The European Command, EUCOM,
of course,
CENTCOM.
Central Command. We are in the AOR of CENTCOM, where we are operating.
We are next to the AOR.
Right. So, and we have we are related to EUCOM, the European Command of the United States military, and we have very good connection with the Pentagon, which is the headquarters of all the American military. We have a defense attaché. We have big delegation in Washington. As you know yourself, you have your own experience. It is still the biggest one in the world because of the nature of this relation. So this is one thing. Second thing is the international community. International relations, we have different countries in the world serving three main lines of efforts. First is the, first build-up. We have our own interest. I will not lie to you. I mean, we have interest these days to learn from others and to share, get back, for us, our interest, like what we call forced build-up. We get some equipment, doctrine, methods, learning from the world. We have different variety of experience around the world, which we would like to learn and to teach in a change. So this is one thing. Second thing is the influence line of effort. Because we are there, we are on the screens around the world. We want to say our story, our point of view. Like if you have 30 minutes or 30 seconds in BBC where they see Israeli soldiers and hitting a Palestinian, there is a whole story behind it, and we want to share this story, not to be perceived as violent, because we are trying to protect our
But
nation.
isn't this the job of the IDF spokesman? spokesperson?
Yeah, there is a very good coordination between these two tools, let's say it, the military diplomacy and the IDF spokesperson. We work totally together. I mean, they have their own lines of efforts and we have lines of efforts.
And your third line?
Yeah, and the third line, as you mentioned before, is operational issues, in which we are cooperating operationally with the other friends, neighbors, whatever, in order to operate better and to learn, again, learn from their capabilities and so on and so forth.
One of your predecessors in the 1990s once had a map on his office wall. Perhaps it's the same office you occupy now, which showed the ranking of military friends Israel has all over the world. At that time, of course, the United States was there. At that time, Jordan entered the picture when we signed peace with it. Egypt, obviously, ever since 1982, and Turkey. At one time, he also mentioned Singapore, India later. Could you now portray the world according to the International Cooperation Division?
So I was trying to describe before, more politically, the three different lines of efforts. We talked about the United States of America, we talked about the international community, and we are talking about the region now. This is the third, and I think this will answer your question. We are looking at our region, our neighbors first. We used to call ourselves, small country surrounded by, when you were young, we used to be a young and small country surrounded by enemies. The aim now is, for the sake of our children, is to become, and we see the news now, to be a small country surrounded by partners. I will not dare say surrounded by friends. Hopefully it will happen one day, but surrounded by partners. So usually we have the global and the local. Now we have local, regional, and global. It's amazing what happens around us. It's almost messianic, thinking about these things. It was my late father's dream, having peace with our neighbors. He came as an immigrant from Romania, as I mentioned before, lost most of his family to the Nazis, and then had to join the military right from the ship to the military service and join all the wars. So when I was young, I'm the youngest amongst 5 brothers and sisters, and used to say, when you become older, you will not join the military. Military will not be needed anymore. It was an Israeli dream. I think every house you heard this sentence. So I don't think it's happening now, but I think I perceive my unit as we have a very unique and special role in promoting this vision. So we have now UAE, and we have Bahrain and Sudan, and there are probably more to follow. There are interest in the region. The traditional way of thinking of us as demons and people with horns and anti-Semitic even thoughts of Israel is changing because of many reasons. We have no time to elaborate on this. But I will seize this opportunity. I mean, not only myself, Israel as a whole, the military, and us as as an international branch, as diplomats of the military, will try to seize this opportunity in order to utilize it as much as we can and to widen this circle of local and regional neighbors.
Let's take the example of Jordan. Sometimes there are very cool relations between the political echelons of the governments. Yet the military on both sides, especially on the ground, of course, we share a border, the Jordan River and other parts, and we share enemies. So we must share intelligence, and we cooperate with each other. Could you elaborate on the difference between the perception of the political relationship and the reality of the military one?
Well, there is two ways of looking at this question, because there is the nature of countries, the culture and how the political system is working, and the demographic issues of every country. And I would like to prevent myself from elaborating on these issues because it's very sensitive. But I would like to say that the military relations, professional military relations between the militaries, my counterpart in the Jordanian part and my relations are very good relations. We talk almost once a week, even more in some times, trying to support each other. Our longest border is with Jordan. And they are here to stay, and we believe that we are here to stay forever. We have to be coordinated. The peace treaty of 1994, it's a dream for us. I think that we are aligned. Myself and my counterpart, both militaries from both sides are aligned in this interest to keep it like that forever.
He is also a Brigadier-General?
He's a Brigadier-General, yes.
What about your relationship with your Egyptian counterparts?
Well, same. It's evolving interest, mutual interest. We have more than 40 years of peace treaty with Egypt now, and I'm talking from the military angle and trying to, again, not ignore, but avoid talking about the political issues, which have ups and downs along the way, Jordan and Egypt. But again, we are neighbors. We are facing mutual challenges these days. Look, the traditional way of thinking of our neighbors, the local and the international is different now. Look at what happens economically. And you see how the military have something to do with it. Because look at Egypt, Greece, Cyprus, Israel, Jordan, and even Lebanon, hopefully one day. You have these gas findings in the East Mediterranean Sea. You have the treaty now we have between Israel, Egypt, Greece, and Cyprus, which we have to share our assets together, ship it by pipe or in other means to Europe, which is an amazing opportunity for
does that
for
compensate
peace.
you? Does it compensate you for the deterioration in the relationship with Turkey?
Look, Turkey is not an enemy country of ours in all means. We have a defense attaché in Israel, which I keep in touch with, the Turkish defense attaché in Tel Aviv. We have history of good relations among the militaries, and we would like to keep it this way. Now there are political time frames in which things can change. So these days, political situation maybe is not the best, but military to military or country to country, we don't perceive Turkey as our enemy. In no means. We have enough enemies. I mean, again, it's not a secret. We have Iran. We have the Iranian entrenchment around us. We have the Iran nuclear capabilities, which threatening us, threatening in the leader, the Khamenei's wars to throw Israel into the fire of hell with their nuclear power. So we have our history of 2,000 years. As military, we are obliged to believe what he says and do our best to avoid it. So we don't want another enemies.
Let's go back to Egypt and to the MFO, the Multinational Force and Observers, which has been in existence for the last 38 years. But there is always a budget X hovering over its head from the Pentagon. This is the curse of the force's success.
Right.
People say there's no need for it because the relations are peaceful. There's a battalion worth of Americans there. Let's take them home. Is that a real scenario?
Well, this is one of the things I'm facing day to day. This is one of the main things I'm doing in my job. As part of, we have different peacekeeping forces around us, mainly the United Nations different forces, but the unique example of the MFO is a wonderful example. It's a very efficient force. It's been utilized during the years and reduced its force since the peace treaty was signed between Israel and Egypt under the supervision of the United States in 1979. And this force was built in the beginning of the 80s. It's still there. It is very important, even crucial, I would say. Why? Because we're living in the Middle East. It's the most unstable region in the world, I think. And we have recent history to see it. We cannot predict what will happen tomorrow morning. So we must have this force. It's both. Again, it's a mutual interest of Israel and Egypt. We talk about these things. We talk about his efficiency and the need to make it more efficient. With the Americans, we share it together. There are three parties to this side. I'm the stakeholder from the Israeli side, so I'm dealing with this issue. Sinai and the force in Sinai to supervise the peace treaty is still critical. Now, what you mentioned before is the paradox of security. As you mentioned, we have security. We face it in the military. The civilians would say, no need for such a big military. We spend a lot of money. But when some conflict occurs, where is the military? It needs to be ready. So our foreign minister, which used to be our chief, used to say the military should be in two different positions: war or getting ready for a war. And this has implications.
Yes, but one of his successors added to it, and the war between the wars.
Yeah. Well, this is between the wars. You're right. Yeah.
Now, as you mentioned, the UN peacekeeping forces, we don't have too much time, but if you can just in shorthand tell us what is the status regarding UNDOF in the Golan Heights and UNIFIL in Lebanon.
Well, thank you for that question, because this is one of the things I'm dealing with most of my time. again, trying to avoid war, trying to deconflict with the countries which we unfortunately don't have peace treaty with, along the Golan Heights and in Lebanon. Mainly in Lebanon, I'm dealing with the UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, on a daily basis.
Interim since 1978. It's
Yes.
still interim.
Still interim, and since 2006, United Nations Security Council Decision 1701, which he has to implement. My day-to-day struggle is how to make it more efficient. There is an elephant in the room. It's not an elephant, it's a monster, which calls Hezbollah. It's growing. We see it growing. It's acting. Recently, it's being more and more blunt. He's working more bluntly. We saw the tunnels in December, which was exposed by our side in December 18, and then anti-tank missile shot at an Israeli vehicle in September, the first day of school, 2019, and then April 2020, this year. The breach in few places in the obstacle we have, and sniper shot and trying to infiltrate Israeli and hit Israeli soldiers in July, August, and
so
September.
Are you satisfied with the operation?
It has to be more. We have no issues with its mandate until this dreamy day. We will have peace with Lebanon, and hopefully we can make peace in 2 days. There are no conflict. Iran is the issue. Hezbollah is the issue, not the Lebanese people. But UNIFIL is very essential for us. It's very important for us. What we are trying to do is to make it more effective and more to utilize its efforts.
Andof in the Golan Heights. Now that the Syrian civil war has changed, has metamorphosed, it is coming back.
Right.
Andof.
Right.
Is that a good force? We only have a few seconds.
Yeah, right. So our aim with UNDOF is to bring back the situation like it was before 2011, before the civil war in Syria. We had more than 40 years of quiet. We want to bring it back to this situation. And we are struggling, the United Nations Security Council, to bring it back to this situation.
General Defrin, one last question to summarize it all.
Right, sir.
We are in the era of coalition warfare, coalitions of the willing. In the next regional war, is Israel going to be part of the coalition?
Well, a good question. Traditionally, Israel is not part of coalitions. The Israeli military was built to protect Israel. So we can cooperate with the other forces to flourish in this area. As again, for the sake of our children. This is what my dream, what my father's dream was, and still what my dream is. One day we'll have peace with our neighbors and we'll cooperate them, utilizing water resources and agriculture and other technologies, not militarily.
Well, as the military diplomat you are, you ran out the clock without answering in the positive. Brigadier-General Effi Defrin, head of the Israeli Cooperation Division in the General Staff, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity again. It was a pleasure. Thank you.